Alex is completely useless. Our daughter deserved better than that loser of a husband. My mother-in-law's words cut through the kitchen air like sharp blades. I was standing in the doorway, holding the wedding anniversary gift I had bought for my wife, when I overheard the conversation that would change everything forever. "I completely agree, dear," replied my father-in-law Richard, his voice dripping with contempt. 5 years married to our princess, and what does he have to show for it? Nothing. He just spends her money and lives off us. My wife Lisa laughed, a laugh I had never heard before, cold and cruel. "You're both right. Sometimes I wonder why I'm still with him. It's kind of pathetic, really." My name is Alex, I'm 31 years old, and at that moment I felt my world collapse. For 5 years, I believed I had a family that loved and respected me. The reality was very different. I backed silently down the hallway, my heart beating so loudly that I feared they could hear it. I climbed the stairs of my in-laws' house, the same house I had invested $60,000 in renovations when they faced financial difficulties 2 years ago. The same house where I had painted every room, repaired the roof with my own hands, and installed a complete security system because I cared about the safety of my wife's family. In the guest room where Lisa and I always stayed when we visited, I opened my laptop. My fingers trembled slightly as I accessed our joint bank accounts. There was the evidence of everything they had conveniently forgotten. $120,000 transferred to Richard's account over the past 3 years. $45,000 to cover Lisa's credit card debt that she had hidden from me. $28,000 in temporary loans to her sister that were never paid back. And more painful than the numbers on the screen, the memory of every excuse I had accepted without question. "It's just until Dad can retire. Mom needs that surgery. It's a family emergency." Emergencies that became constant. Needs that turned into expectations. Gratitude that evaporated and turned into entitlement. Downstairs, I heard more laughter. They were probably planning how to extract more money from the useless husband in the coming months. What they didn't know was that I had stopped being naive a long time ago. In fact, over the past few weeks, I had noticed small signs. Conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. Looks between Lisa and her parents that I couldn't decipher. The way she had started to question every purchase I made, as if my money wasn't really mine. I closed my laptop and sat on the edge of the bed, looking out the window at the garden I had cultivated for them. Every rose, every bush, every stone on the path had been planted and placed by me, investing my time and love in something I believed was our future together. But while they laughed at my supposed uselessness downstairs, I was making a discovery that would change the game completely. If they saw me as a failed husband who only drained resources, maybe it was time to show them exactly what happens when those resources disappear. I opened my phone and started taking notes. Every loan, every transfer, every bill I paid each month. Their house, Lisa's car, even the family health insurance. It all went through my credit card or bank account at some point. If you're enjoying this story of how I discovered the truth about my family, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see how it ended. Because what they didn't know, while they ridiculed me as a useless husband, is that I controlled much more of their financial lives than they realized. And when a useful person decides to become truly useless, the consequences can be devastating. Downstairs, I heard my father-in-law say, "At least we know we can count on his money for a long time to come." That was when I smiled for the first time in weeks. They really had no idea what was coming. While I remained in the bedroom, processing the betrayal I had heard, more voices joined the conversation downstairs. Lisa's younger sister, Jennifer, had arrived with her husband Tom. "Where's Alex?" Jennifer asked, and I could hear the disdain in her voice even through the floor. "He's upstairs, probably messing around on the computer like always," Lisa replied. "You know how he is. Antisocial, always pretending to be working on something important." Tom laughed loudly. "Important? The guy doesn't even have a real job. He messes around with some freelance websites, earning peanuts, while Lisa supports the household." My jaw clenched. Over the past 2 years, my digital consulting company had earned over $400,000. I had deliberately kept a low profile about my financial success, preferring to invest discreetly in my family's well-being rather than brag about it. "And the worst part," continued my mother-in-law Helen, "is that he acts like he's being generous with our money. As if he's doing us a favor." Our money. The words echoed in my mind like a slap in the face. Richard laughed bitterly. Remember when he generously paid for the kitchen renovation? He acted like he was some kind of benefactor. $40,000 to impress his wife, but it actually came out of her pocket. That statement sent a chill down my spine. The money had come out of my business account, transferred directly to the contractor. I had all the receipts, all the invoices filed meticulously in my home office. How could they rewrite reality so blatantly? And what about the time he paid for Helen's trip to visit her sister in Portland? Lisa added. $3,000 for a plane ticket and a hotel, as if it were nothing. Just to show up. My memory of that situation was completely different. Helen had called me in tears, saying her sister was sick and she couldn't afford to travel. I had offered to pay for everything without her even asking, out of compassion. Now I discovered that my generosity was seen as showing off. Alex has always been kind of weird, said Jennifer. Ever since they started dating in college. Remember how quiet he was at family gatherings? He always seemed like he thought he was better than everyone else. Tom agreed, exactly. That superior attitude, like he was analyzing everyone. I never liked him. Lisa deserved someone more normal. I closed my eyes, remembering those first family gatherings. I wasn't quiet because I thought I was superior. I was quiet because I was naturally introverted and was trying to adapt to a family dynamic that was very different from my own. My parents had died in an accident when I was 23, and I had grown up being raised by my grandmother, a quiet, introspective woman. Lisa's family was loud, opinionated, always talking over each other. I thought I was being respectful by listening more and talking less. Now I realized they had interpreted my respect as arrogance. And then there's the thing with Lisa's car, Richard said. He bought her that used BMW for $50,000 as if it were some kind of prize for her. As if she needed his approval to have nice things. Another distortion of reality. Lisa had fallen in love with that particular car at a dealership when we were just out looking. She had mentioned it several times over the course of weeks, but always followed it with, "But it's too expensive, we don't need to spend that much." I had worked overtime for 2 months, taken on extra projects so I could give her that birthday present. Downstairs, Lisa sighed dramatically. You don't know what it's like to live with someone who is always keeping score of every favor. He writes everything down, remembers everything, as if he expects eternal gratitude for every gesture. I didn't write things down because I expected gratitude. I wrote things down because I learned at a young age the importance of financial organization. After my parents died, I discovered they had huge debts I didn't even know existed. I promised myself I would never be caught off guard financially again. And did you see how he reacted when his father lost his job? Lisa continued. He offered financial help the same day, as if he were some kind of savior. He can't let people solve their own problems. Richard had been laid off from the company where he had worked for 15 years. When Lisa told me, in tears, that her parents didn't know how they were going to pay the mortgage, I immediately offered to cover the payments until he found another job. I thought I was being supportive of my wife's family. For the next 8 months, I transferred $2,200 into their account every month. When Richard finally got another job, we never mentioned it again. He never offered to pay me back, and I never asked, assuming it was my contribution to the family's well-being. The thing is, he never lets us forget, Helen said. He's always so condescending, as if he's our personal benefactor. Tom laughed. The guy doesn't even have a personality of his own. He agrees with everything Lisa says, never has an opinion about anything. It's kind of pathetic, actually. This was particularly painful because it wasn't true. I had strong opinions about many things, but I had learned early in the relationship that publicly disagreeing with Lisa resulted in embarrassing fights in front of the family. So I chose my battles, opting for family harmony over constant confrontation. Remember the time we tried to convince Lisa to take that trip to Europe with her friends? Jennifer said. He got all weird, asking questions about money and schedules. Like she needed his permission. I remembered that conversation. Lisa had mentioned that she wanted to travel with her friends, but when I asked about the details, dates, budget, places they planned to visit, it was because I wanted to help organize and maybe plan something special for when she got back. Apparently, my interest was interpreted as possessive control. The conversation went on for another 20 minutes, each family member contributing his or her own distorted version of my gestures of affection and generosity. Every act of love had been reinterpreted as manipulation. Every gesture of financial support had become showmanship. Every moment of quiet had turned into arrogance. When I finally heard chairs being moved and plates being cleared, indicating that lunch was over, I had made up my mind. If they saw me as a useless husband who only drained their resources, then it was time to show them exactly what their life would be like without those resources. I opened my laptop again and started making a detailed list. Not just of the loans and transfers I had made, but of all the monthly bills that came out of my accounts to benefit the extended family. The $1,800 a month family health insurance plan that covered Lisa, her parents, and Jennifer. Lisa's car payment. Her gym membership. Netflix Premium, Spotify, Amazon Prime, all coming out of my accounts for years. But more important than the monthly expenses were the long-term investments. My in-laws' house had an $80,000 second mortgage that I had taken on when Richard fell on hard times. Jennifer's car had been financed through my credit because hers was compromised. As I systematically cataloged every area where my uselessness had sustained their comfortable lives, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Lisa appeared in the bedroom doorway, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Honey, sorry I took so long. You know how my family likes to talk. Shall we go downstairs? Mom made that dessert you like." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I had married 5 years ago, who had just spent an hour ridiculing me to her family. Her smile was perfect, practiced, completely fake. "Sure," I replied calmly, closing my laptop. It would be a shame to waste dessert. As we walked downstairs together, she chattered about the family's plans for the weekend, about the promotion Jennifer had gotten at work, about how excited her parents were about the backyard renovation they wanted to do. What Lisa didn't know, as she happily talked about future renovations financed by my uselessness, was that I had already begun executing the first part of my plan. During the 20 minutes I spent in my room, I didn't just take notes. I also canceled the family health insurance that would be automatically renewed on Monday. It was a small, almost imperceptible beginning. But like any good plan, this one would start with subtle changes they wouldn't even notice at first. And by the time they finally realized what was happening, it would be too late to turn back. Dessert was served with fake smiles and empty compliments. As I savored the lemon tart, I observed each family member with new eyes. Every affectionate gesture now seemed calculated, every conversation sounded like a performance. "Alex dear," Helen said, touching my arm with feigned tenderness, "you've been so generous to us. Richard and I were thinking about renovating the backyard, you know? Nothing too elaborate, just a new deck and maybe a small pool." Richard nodded enthusiastically. "We talked to a contractor last week. It would be around $45,000. Of course, we don't expect you to pay it all at once. We can spread it out." Lisa squeezed my hand under the table. "Wouldn't it be wonderful, honey? A place for the whole family to get together in the summer." $45,000. From people who just called me a useless, good-for-nothing husband. The audacity was breathtaking. "Sounds like an interesting project," I replied calmly. "I'll think about it." Jennifer laughed. "You always say that, Alex. I'll think about it. As if it were some complex business decision. It's just a swimming pool." "That's true," Tom agreed. "You overanalyze simple things. Sometimes it's better to just go with your heart." Go with my heart. Like I had done for 5 years, while they drained my finances and ridiculed my generosity behind my back. "Speaking of heart," Helen said, "Alex, would you mind taking a look at Tom's car? It's making a strange noise, and you know about these things." I didn't know much about cars, but I had learned the basics out of necessity when I was younger and couldn't afford mechanics. Apparently, that qualified me as the family car expert. "Sure," I replied, following Tom to the garage. The car was a well-maintained 3-year-old sedan. Tom opened the hood and pointed vaguely at the engine. "It started last week. A noise like... I don't know, how can I describe it?" I took a quick look. The problem was obvious. Worn belts that needed to be replaced. Simple job, maybe $200 at a shop. "It's the belts," I explained. "Nothing serious, but it needs to be done soon." Tom nodded, closing the hood. "Do you know a cheap place? I'm a little tight this month." Tight. The man who had just called me a loser was asking for a recommendation for a cheap repair shop. The irony was almost comical. "I can check my contacts," I offered. "Actually," Tom hesitated, as if the idea had just occurred to him, "couldn't you just, take care of it? As a family favor." There it was. Once again, the useless husband being asked to solve a financial problem. I said I'd think about it, and we went back inside. The afternoon continued in the same vein. Requests disguised as favors, subtle suggestions about expenses I could cover, backhanded compliments about my generosity. Every interaction confirmed what I had heard earlier. To them, I wasn't a family member. I was an ATM that occasionally offered opinions. When we finally said goodbye, Lisa chattered excitedly all the way home about family plans. The pool, the backyard renovation, the vacation Jennifer wanted to take. "Isn't it wonderful how everyone cares about each other?" she sighed. "Family is everything, isn't it?" "Definitely," I agreed, keeping my eyes on the road. At home, Lisa went straight to the shower, leaving me alone in the living room. I opened my laptop and began doing more detailed calculations. Over the past 3 years, I had transferred or loaned $196,000 to various members of Lisa's family. $196,000 that had never been mentioned as loans, never had repayment deadlines, never generated even a genuine thank you. But more revealing than the numbers were the patterns. Each request was preceded by weeks of emotional conditioning. Comments about my professional fortunes. Remarks about how the family was struggling. Compliments about my generous nature. I had interpreted this as family affection. Now I realized it was systematic manipulation. My phone buzzed with a message from Richard. "Alex, thanks for the wonderful afternoon. Helen is already researching contractors for the pool. How lucky Lisa is to have such a helpful husband." Helpful. Not loving, not intelligent, not successful. Helpful. Like an efficient employee. That night, while Lisa slept beside me, I lay awake making mental lists. Not just of the financial expenses, but of all the small sacrifices I had made to maintain family harmony. The opinions I swallowed to avoid conflict. The weekends spent on home projects for her family, while neglecting my own interests. The jokes at my expense that I had tolerated in the name of getting along. Every memory now had a new interpretation. It wasn't family love, it was consented exploitation. Around 3 in the morning, I made a decision that would change everything. If they saw me as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be respected, then it was time to show them exactly what happens when that resource suddenly runs dry. The plan that began to form in my mind wasn't about revenge, it was about education. They needed to learn the real value of the things they took for granted. And I would be the most effective teacher they ever had. On Monday, I would start implementing subtle changes that they wouldn't even notice at first. Changes that would become more and more obvious as the week progressed. Because if there's one thing I've learned from building my company from the ground up, it's that people only value what they can lose. And they were about to find out exactly how much they could lose. On Monday morning, while Lisa was getting ready for work, I called David Martinez, my personal accountant for 8 years. "Alex, good to hear from you. How can I help?" "David, I need urgent advice on personal asset structuring. Can I stop by your office today?" 2 hours later, I was sitting in his conference room with stacks of documents spread out on the mahogany table. "Interesting," David muttered, reviewing the financial records. "You have a very clear pattern of undocumented transfers to third parties here. From a tax standpoint, that could be problematic." "What do you mean?" "Well, technically, any transfer over $15,000 per year to an individual must be reported as a gift. You transferred $196,000 over 3 years to," he checked his notes, "6 different people in your wife's family." I felt a chill in my stomach. What if I didn't report it? "You're subject to significant IRS penalties. But there is a solution." David smiled. "We can retroactively reclassify these transfers as low or zero interest loans. That would require proper documentation and establishing payment schedules." The first piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. "Get all the necessary documentation ready, David. I want everything legalized by the end of the week." Back home, I found 3 missed messages on my phone. Richard, Helen, and Jennifer, all with different urgent matters that coincidentally involved money. Richard called first. Alex, son, I spoke to the contractor this morning. He can start on the pool next week, but he needs 50% down. Can you transfer the $22,500 today? Sure, Richard. I just need to get some paperwork in order first. Tax stuff, you know. Oh, sure. You've always been so meticulous with these things. Meticulous. The word echoed in my mind as Helen called next. Alex, honey, I need a little favor. The car broke down and the repair shop wants $4,200 up front to start the repairs. You know how tight we are this month. No problem, Helen. I'll take care of it today. Jennifer was third. Alex, sorry to bother you, but remember I mentioned wanting to take that graphic design course? I got a partial scholarship, but I still need $8,900. Do you think you could? Consider it done, Jennifer. 3 requests, totaling over $35,000. In a single day. From people who called me useless behind my back. As I catalogued these new emergencies, my phone rang with an unexpected call. Alex? This is Michael Robertson from Robertson and Associates. Michael was the family lawyer for years, one of the connections I had provided when Richard ran into labor issues. Michael, what a surprise. How can I help? Actually, I wanted to ask you a question. I got a strange call from Richard today. He was asking about how to structure a divorce to protect family assets from a spouse. He specifically mentioned your name. The blood drained from my face. He said that. Not directly, but it was pretty clear he was talking about you and Lisa. I thought you should know. After hanging up, I sat in silence for 10 minutes. They weren't just exploiting me financially, they were actively planning to cut me out of the equation. The second call was to Rebecca Chun, one of the best corporate lawyers in town. Rebecca, I need a confidential consultation on asset protection in the event of a divorce. Sure, Alex. When would you like to meet? Now, if possible. At her office, I explained the situation completely. The undocumented transfers, the informal loans, the discovery of the family's divorce plans. Do you have evidence of all these transfers? Rebecca asked, taking notes quickly. Every penny documented. Bank statements, receipts, even emails where they requested the funds. Excellent. From a legal standpoint, you're in a very strong position. Especially considering that your company is solely owned by you and established before the marriage. She explained how to structure a pre-separation agreement that would protect my assets and establish repayment terms for all outstanding loans. One last thing, she said, closing her folder. If they're planning a divorce to protect family assets, they've probably already moved money to accounts you don't know about. You should look into that. If you're following this incredible story of discovery and strategic planning, subscribe to the channel to see how Alex turns this game around completely. On Wednesday, I hired a private investigator, Jake Morrison, a former police detective specializing in financial fraud. I want a full report on my wife's and in-laws' financial activities over the last 6 months, I explained, handing him a list of all the relevant names and information. Looking for anything specific? Unusual transactions, accounts I don't know about, anything that suggests they're hiding assets. Jake smiled. This kind of case is more common than you think. I'll have preliminary information in 48 hours. While waiting for the report, I began implementing subtle changes to test her reactions. First, I forgot to renew our Netflix premium plan. Lisa complained at dinner. Honey, Netflix isn't working right. It looks like it downgraded to the basic plan. Oh, it must be a system error. I'll check it out. But I didn't check. I wanted to see how long it would take her to notice other similar errors. 2 days later, I accidentally let her gym membership card expire without renewing it. Alex, my card was declined at the gym today. It was embarrassing. That's strange. It must be a problem with the bank. I'll call them tomorrow. Again, I didn't call. On Thursday, Jake handed me a 15-page report that changed everything. Your wife has opened 3 bank accounts at different banks in the last 4 months, he explained, pointing to photocopied documents. Total deposited, $87,000. Where did that money come from? Mostly from a joint account you have at First National. Small weekly transfers of $2,000 to $3,000. Probably so it wouldn't attract attention. The report also showed that Richard had transferred the deed to the house to Helen's name, and that Jennifer had bought a new car for $40,000, paid in cash. They've been preparing for a divorce for months, Jake concluded. Moving assets, creating legal separation of property, building a case that you're financially dependent on them. That night, Lisa came home with gifts. An expensive shirt for me, French perfume for her, and a $200 bottle of wine. I thought we'd celebrate our life together, she said, kissing me with more passion than she'd shown in months. As she prepared dinner, chattering happily about weekend plans, I watched a carefully orchestrated performance. Every affectionate gesture, every smile, every intimate touch, all calculated to keep me docile while they finalized their preparations. After dinner, when she went to take a shower, I opened my laptop and finalized the documents David had prepared. Retroactive loan agreements for all transfers over the past 3 years. 8% compound interest per year. Full payment due in 30 days. Total, $243,000. I also signed Rebecca's documents, establishing a trust that protected my business assets and intellectual property. When Lisa came out of the bathroom wearing the lingerie I had bought her for our anniversary, I smiled and kissed her tenderly. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," I replied, and technically I wasn't lying. I loved the woman I had married 5 years ago. The problem was that this woman had apparently never really existed. On Friday morning, while Lisa was still asleep, I received an email from Michael Robertson. Richard had called again, this time asking for specific information about my business assets. It was time to speed up the schedule. I called David. "I want to hand over all the loan documents today." I called Rebecca. "Activate all the protective measures we discussed." And I made one last call, to the accounting firm that managed Richard's company's finances. "Hi, this is Alex. I'm married to Lisa Sterling, Richard's daughter. I need to report some tax irregularities I've discovered involving undocumented loans." When Lisa woke up, I was already in the kitchen, making coffee and scrambled eggs, humming softly. "You seem in a good mood today," she remarked, hugging me from behind. "I have a surprise for the whole family at Sunday lunch," I replied, turning to kiss her. "Something that will change everything for you." She smiled, thinking I was referring to some generous gift or announcement of an even bigger investment. If she knew that the surprise involved $243,000 in overdue loans and a full tax audit of the entire family, she might not be smiling. But she would find out in 48 hours. And when she did, her useless husband would finally show her just how useful he could be when necessary. Sunday lunch began as usual. Helen served the roast beef she'd been making for decades, Richard complained about the football on TV, and Jennifer chattered about her latest promotion at work. Lisa squeezed my hand under the table, whispering, "I still can't believe you have a surprise for everyone." If only she knew. I waited until everyone had finished dessert before standing up, tapping my wine glass lightly to get everyone's attention. "Family, as you know, I have always cared deeply about the well-being of all of you." I smiled warmly. "For years, I have helped you financially whenever you needed it, and today I want to make our partnership official." Richard leaned forward, interested. "Make it official?" "Exactly." I pulled a leather folder from my bag. "I spoke with my accountant this week, and we discovered some tax irregularities. Apparently, all the transfers I made to you should be classified as loans to avoid problems with the IRS." Helen's smile faltered slightly. "Loans." "Don't worry," I reassured them, handing out copies of the contracts. "I've prepared all the necessary documentation. Complete history for the last 3 years, standard compound interest of 8% per year." Lisa took her copy, flipping through it quickly. Her expression changed from a confident smile to confusion, then to something close to panic. "Alex," she said slowly, "this says I owe $87,000? $87,400, to be exact. Including interest." Richard studied his document with growing alarm. $123,000? But I thought those were gifts from the family." "Unfortunately, the IRS doesn't see it that way," I explained calmly. "David Martinez, my accountant, was very clear about this. Any transfer over $15,000 annually must be documented as an official loan or gift. since we didn't report them as gifts. You can't be serious, Jennifer interrupted, her voice rising an octave. $52,000? For helping with tuition and a car. The contracts have all the legal specifications, I continued, keeping my tone professional. Payment in full due within 30 days, as required by tax regulations to avoid penalties. Tom was frantically doing calculations on his cell phone. Helen, this adds up to over $200,000 in total. $243,800, I corrected, including interest and administrative fees. The silence in the room was deafening. Each family member processed the numbers, the implications, the reality that the useless husband had become their biggest creditor. Lisa was the first to recover. Alex, this is ridiculous. We're married. My money is your money. Interesting that you should mention that. I pulled out a second folder. Because my private investigator discovered 3 bank accounts you opened without my knowledge. $87,000 transferred from our joint account. The blood drained from her face. How did you? Jake Morrison, former detective specializing in financial fraud. Very efficient. I smiled kindly. He also discovered that you consulted Michael Robertson about structuring a divorce to protect family assets from me. Richard stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. Listen here, kid. Dr. Robertson called me concerned, I continued unperturbed. Apparently, he found the consultation odd considering that my company is solely premarital property, and all significant assets are in my name. Helen began to cry. Alex, you don't understand. We didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to hurt me? My voice remained calm, but something dangerous flashed in my eyes. I heard you call me a useless husband, a failure, a parasite. Jennifer said I was pathetic. Tom said I don't even have a real job. The room fell deathly silent. Every person present realized simultaneously that his useful husband had heard every cruel word. And the most fascinating thing, I continued, is discovering that Richard transferred the deed to the house to Helen. Jennifer bought a car for $40,000 in cash, and you moved money into secret accounts. All while planning to sue me as a parasitic financial dependent. Lisa tried one last move. Alex, I know this looks bad, but we can explain. There's no need for explanations. I stood up calmly. Contracts are legally binding. You have 30 days to pay in full, or I'll file a collection suit. You wouldn't do that to us, Helen whispered. Helen, you've already done this to me. I methodically put away my documents. The difference is that I have legal proof of every penny transferred, every account secretly opened, every consultation with a divorce lawyer. Richard exploded, You're a manipulative son of a bitch. Am I? I smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. Because I have a recording of every conversation from last Sunday. Including Lisa agreeing that I'm kind of pathetic, and you discussing how to drain more money from your failed husband. I pulled out my phone and played the recording for a few seconds. Their voices filled the room, mocking and conspiring. How did you? Lisa was shaking. The recording app activated when I heard the first words. 53 minutes of evidence of financial conspiracy and fraudulent divorce planning. Jennifer began to sob. We had no idea you were listening. Of course you didn't. You were too busy planning how to more thoroughly exploit your useless husband over the next few months. I walked toward the door, pausing for one last remark. Oh, and Richard? I reported your tax irregularities related to the undocumented loans. The IRS should be contacting you this week for a full audit. The last thing I saw before I left was Richard slumping back into his chair, Helen crying uncontrollably, and Lisa staring at the contracts as if they were death sentences. Outside, I breathed in the fresh air and smiled. The useless husband had just become the most expensive problem in their lives. And the real panic hadn't even begun. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new downtown apartment office, reviewing my company's financial reports when Rebecca called. Alex, I have some interesting news about your ex-in-laws, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Richard had to sell the house to cover the IRS fines. Helen is living with her sister in Portland. And Jennifer, well, she lost her job when the company found out about the irregularities in her car financing. And Lisa. Oh, that's the best part. She's been to 3 different lawyers trying to contest the divorce. They all said the same thing. Considering the evidence of financial fraud and malicious divorce planning, she's lucky she's not facing criminal charges. After hanging up, I looked out the window on the 23rd floor. The view of the city was spectacular, but more important was what that view represented. Total independence. Peace of mind. The end of 5 years of being treated like a walking ATM. The divorce proceedings had been surprisingly quick. When Lisa found out that I had recordings of all the family conspiracies, plus evidence of her secret accounts and fraudulent transfers, she accepted a settlement that left her with only the clothes on her back and the car she was still paying on. The company had flourished since I eliminated the distraction of constant family emergencies. Without monthly transfers of thousands of dollars to cover the irresponsibilities of ungrateful relatives, my cash flow had completely stabilized. But the real satisfaction didn't come from financial success. It came from discovering who I really was when I wasn't constantly trying to prove my worth to people who never valued me. My phone buzzed with a message from Jake, the investigator. "Did you see the news? Richard's been indicted for tax evasion." Apparently, the irregularities ran much deeper than we imagined. I smiled, but not cruelly. Richard had dug his own grave long before I appeared on the scene. I merely provided the tools for the authorities to find what he had buried. David Martinez showed up at my door at 2 in the afternoon carrying a bottle of champagne and a huge smile. "Alex, my friend, you are officially one of my favorite case studies," he announced, placing the bottle on the table. "The restructuring of your assets was a model of defensive financial planning. His profits are up 42% since we eliminated the family bloodletting." "Family bloodletting," I repeated, relishing the expression. "That's a poetic way of describing 5 years of my life." "And best of all," David continued, "you did it all completely legally. No court in the country would convict a man for collecting legitimate loans or protecting his assets from marital fraud." That evening, I dined alone at a restaurant Lisa had always dismissed as too pretentious. The irony was not lost on me. Without her constant judgment, I had rediscovered the pleasure of enjoying fine things simply because I enjoyed them. The waiter, a young man named Marcus, casually mentioned that he was studying business and dreamed of starting his own company. "What field?" I asked, genuinely interested. "Sustainable consulting for small businesses. Helping family-owned companies modernize without losing their identity." We talked for 20 minutes about his plans, and when I left my card along with a generous tip. "If you need mentoring or seed money, let me know." It was strange how real generosity worked. When I helped Lisa's family, every gesture was treated as an obligation or manipulation. But helping Marcus felt natural, without expectations or emotional demands. A week later, I received an unexpected email. It was from Helen. "Alex, I know I have no right to ask anything after everything that happened. But you need to know that I recognize how unfair we were to you. Jennifer wants to talk to you when she's ready. Not to ask for money or favors, but to truly apologize. You didn't deserve any of what we did." Reading that email didn't bring the vindictive satisfaction I had expected. It brought something deeper, confirmation that my decision had been the right one. Not for punishing them, but for freeing myself from a toxic system that was hurting us all. I simply replied, "Helen, I appreciate your words. I hope you all find a healthier way to relate to the people you love." At the end of that month, Lisa tried one last move. She showed up at my building wearing the dress I had bought her for our last wedding anniversary, with tears in her eyes and a speech prepared about second chances. "Alex, I've made terrible mistakes, but I still love you. Can we try again? I can change." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who had conspired to rob me while pretending to love me. The person who had laughed at my supposed uselessness while living off my work. "Lisa," I said calmly, "I don't doubt that you feel regret now. But regret for the consequences is not the same as regret for the actions. You're only here because your plan failed, not because you recognize that you were wrong." She tried to argue, but I was already closing the door. 6 months later, I was giving a talk on defensive financial planning at a business conference when I saw a familiar face in the audience. Tom, my ex-brother-in-law, was sitting in the back row, furiously taking notes. After the presentation, he approached me with a humble expression. "Alex, I know I have no right to talk to you, but could you give me some advice?" I'm trying to rebuild my finances after everything. For a moment, I considered ignoring him. But then I realized something interesting. Tom wasn't asking for money or favors. He was asking for knowledge. He wanted to learn how to fish, not be given fish. We talked for an hour about budgeting, investing, and long-term planning. When he left, he genuinely thanked me for the time I had spent helping him. That interaction taught me something fundamental: the difference between people who want to be saved and people who want to save themselves. Tom had chosen to grow through adversity. The rest of his family had chosen to blame others for their difficulties. A year after that fateful Sunday lunch, I was signing the papers to start my second company, a consulting firm specializing in family restructuring and asset protection. The irony was perfect. My devastating personal experience had become my greatest professional advantage. Marcus, the waiter I had met at the restaurant, became my first junior partner. His sustainable consulting firm was thriving, and our partnership had spawned projects that benefited dozens of small businesses. Do you know what the hardest part of that whole situation was? I asked Marcus during one of our weekly meetings. Finding out about the betrayal? No. It was accepting that I had allowed it to happen. For 5 years, I chose to ignore obvious signs because it was easier to be useful than to confront the truth. The real transformation happened when I stopped seeing myself as a victim and started seeing myself as someone who had made bad decisions. If this story of transformation and justice has inspired you, subscribe to the channel to see more stories of people who refused to be treated like doormats and decided to rebuild their lives with dignity and intelligence. Today, 2 years later, my life is unrecognizable. I have relationships based on mutual respect, not financial exploitation. My work contributes positively to the community. Most importantly, I wake up every day knowing exactly how much I am worth, without needing anyone else's validation. Richard is still dealing with tax issues. Helen found work in Portland and, from what I hear, is learning to live within her means. Jennifer is rebuilding her career with more humility. And Lisa? Lisa finally learned the difference between being loved and being useful. As for me, I learned that the most powerful revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you, but building a life so full that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. The last time I thought about them was when I received Marcus's wedding invitation. He had found a partner who genuinely supported him, and together they were building something beautiful and sustainable. As I adjusted my tie for the ceremony, I smiled at my reflection in the mirror. The man staring back was no longer the useless husband who had been humiliated in a kitchen 2 years ago. He was someone who had learned that true value isn't measured by how much you give, but by how much respect you demand in return.